So a few days ago, I recommended one beautiful opening response against the queen's pawn opening where white starts with d4. So I said go pawn to e6, and after c4, you simply go pawn to c5. Not yet the Benoni, by the way. Once again, if you're playing this in a real tournament, you will see most of your opponents playing pawn to d5, which is the top played move in the Masters database, cause I mean, that's the idea. And I recommended one beautiful plan after pawn to d5, which begins with e takes d5, you first take, and after pawn takes, you go d6, and then put your dark squared bishop on f6, then your king's knight on g6, and then later on you castle short, trade off your light squared bishop, go a6, knight bd7, controlling the e5 square, then queen a5 or queen c7 etc. Your rook will join the party on e8, somewhere in the middle game, and that seems to work very well, at least for me. But today's main question is, what if white doesn't play the queen's gambit setup after pawn to d4 and e6? What do you do? Instead of c4, they play the London system or the Zukertort variation with knight f3 or pawn to e3. That's what we are going to be looking at in this video, and I'll be fast. So let's begin with the London system or the accelerated London system. The move I recommend is to go knight f6, waiting for white to play knight f3, by the way. They may also play pawn to e3 or knight c3. So let's start with knight f3. After knight f3, the main theoretical move here is to go pawn to c5. And here there is one beautiful trap that your opponent may run into if they are not careful. For example, after pawn to c5, if your opponent plays the top played move pawn to e3, well, now you can simply take, and white needs to take with the pawn or the queen, otherwise knight takes d4 is a very big blunder due to pawn to e5. White will lose one minor piece here. Say bishop takes, this is when you go queen a5 check, and on the next move grab that poor bishop. So after knight f3, c5 and pawn to e3, then pawn takes, white needs to capture either with a pawn or the queen. For example, e takes d4. One beautiful continuation that I like from here is pawn to b5. Also playable in classical tournaments, by the way, but many people don't know this line. So you go pawn to b5. As you can see from the eval bar, position is like plus 0.3, almost equal according to Stockfish. If white takes the pawn that looks to be free, that will be a blunder due to queen a5 check. And now this time you want to win white's bishop, right? If knight c3 is played, you keep on attacking white like this. I mean, because the more you attack them, the more they are likely to blunder. So in this position, white is confused. We are also attacking the bishop, so they play bishop d2 to unpin the knight. But either ways, that loses a piece due to, knight takes and queen takes. Oh! There's this other move, pawn to a4. If you're playing against an advanced opponent, they might see this move a4 after you take their knight on c3, because this looks like a great defense. But guess what? You're still going to be up a piece. After queen takes b5, you now sacrifice your queen. If bishop takes, you're just going to play something like queen f5 or queen d5, depending on your taste. If pawn takes queen, you will also take white's queen like that and see who's up a piece. Anyway, so white doesn't have to take this sacrificed pawn. Anyways, the whole idea is to play bishop b7 and start controlling this highlighted diagonal in the endgame after developing all your pieces. So in most cases, what I like doing in the queen's pawn game is delaying the development of my d pawn, okay? If need be, I want to play d6 to stop knight e5. I'm not saying you can't play d5. d5 is also fine, but you need to over control the e5 square as well. By the way, if white plays something like bishop d3 in this position, you can now continue with normal moves like bishop e7. This is a cheeky move because you're giving white one more time to blunder so that you can go queen a5 check and knight d5. So that's what is happening here. Well, if white castles short, maybe they know something. So you just have to protect your b5 pawn, and then next you want to put your bishop on b7. If a4, you have pawn to b4, by the way. If pawn to c4, white is just going to remain with an isolated pawn on d4 for the endgame. So they have to play something like c3 in this position, after which you can just castle short. See how the eval bar is maintained in the middle. Say knight bd2, because what else? Now you go bishop b7, over controlling the e4 square. So rook e1 may be played, and then see what I talked about, you guys. You simply go pawn to d6. You just want to be a little bit solid, not allowing knight e5. This time if pawn to a4 comes, knowing you don't have b4, you can just take, and after rook takes, this is where you continue playing normal chess. For example, knight bd7, my plan is to go queen c7 and then push pawn to e5. So it is the e pawn that I want to push instead of the d pawn. Let's just say pawn to c4. In this position, it is even safer to play e5 because the light squared bishop is undefended. For example, e5, and after pawn takes, I take back with my d pawn, knowing white can't take like this, because after knight takes, whoops, they have to do something about their light squared bishop. Otherwise, a move like bishop takes will just enable me to be up a piece once again. If they choose to take on e5 with the rook instead of using the bishop, well, the best you can do is just to attack that rook like this. You have equal number of material, by the way, but with this move, you're about to be up an exchange because, I mean, there's nothing that white can do here to save the rook. For example, rook f5, then bishop takes f4, and after rook takes, you simply take the light squared bishop like this. Again, you are up a piece. So remember, this all happened in the accelerated London version where white starts with knight f3 first. So you just go pawn to c5 once again, and after pawn to e3, you take, waiting for them to blunder so that you can go e5, then queen a5 check and win the piece. Or if pawn takes, you remember to play pawn to b5, and sooner or later they are going to blunder. If they play pawn to c3, by the way, now it's obvious that your b pawn is under attack. You don't have queen a5 check anymore to win material, so you just defend your b5 pawn like this, and after bishop d3, you continue playing normal chess. You have bishop b7, also bishop e7 first. In fact, I would play bishop e7, keeping my d pawn because I want to play d6 in case of knight e5. The pawn I want to push in the middle game is the e pawn to e5. Say knight bd2, I now go bishop b7 to over control the e4 square. Again, if pawn to a4, I just take to oversimplify things. After rook takes, since I don't have knight bd7 in this position, I can just castle short, and after white does the same, I can play a5 if you want, or simply this move, pawn to d6. Once again, there is nothing wrong, so I'm playing like a tortoise, moving slowly, but my plan is very lethal. I just want to find the right time to play e5. For example, after rook e1, I can now go knight bd7, because what else? And this is where we saw this move, pawn to c4, and my e5 pawn break, since the light squared bishop is not defended. Right. The good part of this system that I'm showing you is that there are a lot of transpositions, so you might be going back to the same lines, and you need to remember this pawn to b5 tactical move. Don't just rush with d5. That's okay, but unless you are prepared to, play like that. Once again, after bishop f4, just go knight f6. So we just looked at what to do against the knight f3 line in the accelerated London system. But what if white plays the top played move, pawn to e3? This might transpose once again after you play pawn to c5, because either ways, white will play knight f3. If knight f3, obviously, again you just take, and the game might transpose back to the lines that we looked at. For example, knight takes d4 runs into pawn to e5 and queen a5 check. So let's look at something else. After you play pawn to c5, instead of knight f3, London players love playing the move c3. I mean, this is the typical London system, right? They don't push their c pawn to c4. They want to develop their queen's knight on d2. However, just go ahead and release the tension on the center. White players normally take with the e pawn in this position, leaving this London pawn chain fixed on the queen side. And now in this position, there are a number of things you can do. For example, pawn to b6, followed by bishop b7, then start controlling this highlighted diagonal. Or even bishop e7 is playable. In fact, see what's happening in the Masters database. All these wins for black and a lot of draws, which tells you something about this defense. The move I like anyways, instead of pawn to b6, is b5 once again, sacrificing a pawn in exchange for piece activity. If white doesn't take, I'll just play pawn to a6 and then bishop b7. I have a well advanced pawn on the queen side and a lot of space. If bishop takes, the main line is queen b6 followed by bishop b7, but the reason why I don't like playing queen b6 just yet is that white has this intermediate move queen b3, and we may end up exchanging queens. So what I love doing is playing bishop b7 first, inviting the move knight f3. By the way, this is also playable even in classical tournaments. You are just playing an imbalanced game, just like the Benko Gambit or the Benoni. So after knight f3, this is when I play queen b6. You are attacking the light squared bishop. Once the light squared bishop moves on any of the highlighted squares, you will take the b2 pawn. That's the idea. If white plays queen b3 this time, you mess up their pawn structure on the queen side like this. And after pawn takes, you have all the time to play a6 and then exchange queens if you want. Or just go knight c6. It is even safer in this position. We didn't want to exchange queens. Knight bd2 may be played. The whole purpose of knight c6 if white doesn't take is to go knight a5. They have to hold on to their bishop somehow. But still there is this move a6. If bishop d3 is played, now you take the pawn on b2. So it was all about the b2 pawn since the London bishop went on vacation. So that's the whole idea, ladies and gentlemen. You are threatening to take the rook. If castle short is played, by the way, you can just, grab that free pawn and, threaten to capture everything. You play knight c6. Your main plan, as always, is bishop e7, castle short, pawn to d6, and find a way to push your e pawn. By the way, note how I'm not even talking about this move d takes c5 because you can simply go bishop takes or take the c5 pawn like this. So I can't waste your time, discussing this. Anyway, after e3 and pawn to c5 and then white plays c3, the typical London defense, again you just take. Now other people who are not typical London players take back with the c pawn. If you want to stand out and keep things interesting, once again you can try my elbow gambit, you guys. This is what I'm known for, coming up with weird moves that are not common to a human eye. Pawn to b5. Once again, as you can see from the eval bar, position is almost equal according to Stockfish. This is not a blunder. The plan is still the same. After bishop takes, you want to go queen a5, but see, this time the dark squared bishop is defended by the e pawn. So after you go queen a5 and white plays knight c3, your knight d5 move won't be, very strong. It is for this reason you want to play bishop b7 first, attacking the g2 pawn. They'll most likely defend with the knight. And now this is when you go queen a5 check, intending to win the light squared bishop. After knight c3, you can go knight d5 if you want, but the best is to add more salt to the wound, bishop b4. With bishop b4, I don't know how many people are going to forget that their light squared bishop is hanging. For example, you will see them playing moves like castle short or even pawn to a3, forgetting that you have bishop takes and on the next move you take the light squared bishop. Speaking of castle short, once again after they do this, you can just take on c3 and take the light squared bishop. Anyway, after bishop b4, they have to find this Stockfish move, pawn to a4, allowing you to just, take on c3 with check. In fact, you can start with a6, chasing your enemy's piece away from your territory. They'll play something like bishop d3 here, after which you now take on c3, and after pawn takes, you go queen takes c3 check. Material is equal. In fact, in this position, you are forcing white to lose his right to castle. Otherwise, moves like queen d2 will run into queen takes a1 check. If knight d2, the light squared bishop will be hanging. So this is just how deadly this weapon is against the London system, if you start with my elbow response. Lastly, after d4 and pawn to e6, white may start with knight f3 before playing bishop f4. We're still looking at the London system, by the way, because that's what today's video is all about. So once again, you can go pawn to, who knows, maybe white may play pawn to c4 and then you'll go back to, what you know. Again, d takes c5 can be met with bishop takes, or first of all, you go queen a5 check and then you take that pawn. So you won't see a lot of people doing that. A typical London player won't play the move pawn to e3 here, because that would block the London bishop and they'll probably not play the London system. So they play moves like pawn to c3, but the move I like playing here is knight f6. And this is when you might see your opponents playing the London system. bishop f4 or bishop g5. Let's look at both, starting with bishop f4. You know that you want to play e3 next. First, we don't want to go pawn to d5 just yet, even though that is playable. Remember, our plan is to go d6 and pawn to e5 in the near future. So you want to start with pawn takes, that's okay. And then the top played move is c takes d4. I mean, knight takes just looks ridiculous, you guys. Look at the pawn structure. You have all the time to go d6 and pawn to e5. So they won't take back with the knight. Even taking back with the queen doesn't make a lot of sense. Queen takes runs into knight c6, and then you have d6, then e5, followed by queen a5 or queen b6, whatever. So they'll always take with the c pawn. And now here is how I like deceiving my opponents. I know they want to play pawn to e3, so I play the third common move in the master's database. Now you know that what I'm teaching you is religious education, you guys. Something you don't see on YouTube very often. So you go pawn to b5 anyways, inviting pawn to e3 because this comes with an attack, but you don't play a6 just yet. You want to wait for them to blunder, right? You go bishop b7. And lo, this may transpose back to one of the lines that I just showed you guys, where you go queen a5 check once again. Remember, this time the London bishop is defended by the e-pawn. They play knight c3. You can't take, and try to remember the move I showed you in this exact position. What's that? Very good if at all you remembered the move bishop b4. And this is where white might lose a piece if they castle short or if they play pawn to a3. And this is how history may repeat itself, you guys. So just remember these lines and you won't have any problem with the London system. Pawn to b5 is a very clever move, which invites pawn to e3, and then you pretend as if you are not saying anything. So in my elbow system, you want to avoid playing common lines like pawn to d5, knight c6. You first of all want to go pawn to b5 and bishop b7. So you replace d5 and knight c6 with b5 and bishop b7. Instead of bishop f4, you might see your opponents playing bishop g5. Once again, you just want to take, like pop, and they have to take with the c-pawn as we saw. And now you have all sorts of moves like queen b6, bishop e7, knight c6, anything is playable. But once again, you may try this, pawn to b5. This time, knowing your knight is pinned to the queen, your opponent might even be excited and play pawn to e4. But you know what? Just don't worry about that. Go bishop b7. You want to take that pawn with the bishop. They'll most likely play pawn to e5 because they think they're going to win material, but that's not how chess works. You have h6 wanting to take the bishop. After bishop h5, you have queen a5 check, because now there is no bishop to come back on d2. If queen d2, you have bishop b4 and knight e4, supported by your light squared bishop. See this piece coordination. If knight bd2, you see you can even start by taking on f3, attacking the queen. After queen takes, attacking your rook, you play knight d5, preparing to go bishop b4 next. Even after a3, by the way, you can just go bishop b4. The rook is undefended. Yep, like this. And there's a problem. You have knight c6 coming, knight takes. So just remember this plan and you will never have any problems in your life. Pawn to b5 is the secret, followed by bishop b7. In my next video, I'm going to show you what to do against other lines where white doesn't play the London or the Queen's Gambit setup. So the move we're going to be looking at is probably knight f3 followed by pawn to e3. Now, time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say, so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Ruy Lopez, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.